Welcome back to the Keep It Up with the Joneses podcast. I'm your host, Jared, along with my co host, Doug.
Douglas Graves. Hope you guys are having a fantastic Thursday morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it may be.
Awesome. So, we're going to jump into the Lions recap a little bit. Kind of want to talk about some of the things we saw in that game. I feel like we got a good show for you guys today. So, hopefully, you guys can kind of follow along with us. And we're hoping this goes well. I think we're both a little disappointed in how that game with the Lions went down.
Most definitely.
Yeah, it was not the best game for the Cowboys, obviously. Doug and I kind of broke into some of the film this week, looking at the All 22, and we definitely noticed a few things that we just kind of want to point out. First thing I want to talk about is just I think Dak played really well in that game. I was kind of watching some of the stuff that went wrong on offense, and you know, I think a lot of it really had to do with our offensive line. I think Dak threw for 370 plus yards in that game, and he was putting the ball where it had to go. I think we just saw a lot of the offensive line kind of breaking down in key moments. Um, and we'll kind of break down some specific stuff later. But Nate Thomas is terrible. I don't know if you kind of took the same thing away from that game that I did. Of course, it was always going to be a hard matchup against Aiden Hutchinson. He's one of the best defensive ends in the league,
hmm
but he definitely got rocked most of this game. And it wasn't just in pass protection. I saw a lot of plays where he just kind of missed his blocks in the run game too. And that's going to happen for a young guy too. But I think what I really just took away from the offense of this game was that Nate Thomas kind of wrecked a lot of the game for us. And Terrence Steele wasn't great either, but Nate Thomas definitely kind of shook up the game plan a little bit. Also noticed that Cooper Beebe he missed a lot of blocks. And
hmm
this is a guy that we're probably going to be extending, or maybe not. They may look to just replace him in the draft in a couple years, but the guy he's good when he's good, and he's a monster. He's a really strong center who pushes people, but he's not super athletic at times. And I think we're seeing a lot of that on our offensive line right now, where they want to run this power run scheme, but you're just not getting a lot of push up front.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of that. At times it seems like they do just fine with it. You'll have those games where Murray or Williams seems to just, there's a hole almost every time he touches the ball. But like you said, it seems like sometimes they struggle in the hard parts, the power run, where you really need that strong key piece in the center and both your guards.
For
So
sure.
I
Absolutely.
agree. I agree with everything that you're saying so far. As far as Cooper Beebe, he is a legitimate starter in the league, but I wouldn't say that he's unreplaceable. You could definitely upgrade at the center positions.
For sure. Yeah, and I don't think it's anywhere near the priority list for the Cowboys going into next year, but I don't know if you want to extend the guy, I don't know what he would command, but I would assume it'd be over 10 million a year, maybe 15 or so, and I think if it were me, I'd try to replace him in the draft. Maybe one of
Yeah,
those third round picks or so.
I think with us saving the money from the Micah Parsons deal and everything, and where we seem to be kind of putting our dollars towards, in the future, I kind of agree with you. I don't think it would be too bad to draft another guy or bring in somebody from free agency that's a little bit cheaper because, like we both said, yeah, he's a good player, but he's not a great player. He is replaceable. You can replace most of that production or most of the help that he gives the offensive line, and not have to pay the 15 million, 10 million a year, that he's going to command from his first big contracts.
For sure. Yeah, and we're not gonna stick on the offense too much here because I feel like there's a lot more to break down the defense. But the other thing that I took away from the offense in that game, and I think we both kind of saw the trend, Shoddy seems to love running on first down. And
hmm
running on first down is not always a bad thing. I like it a lot better than second and 10 runs. I'll say that at least. But I saw just too many times where you get stuck behind the chains, and you kind of saw it with me. The Lions played a lot of guys in the box. They had 7 to 9 players in the box almost every play.
hmm
And, of course, you got CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens on the outside. You would think most teams would be afraid of running a base defense against this Cowboys offense. The Lions weren't. They were not scared at all of our passing game. And of course, the stats look great on paper, but, we got to see some more production out of an offense with this much talent on it. I'll say the other thing that I wanted to mention was our tight ends got their butts handed to them almost the entire game in the run game. We saw a couple good plays here and there. I think we saw one where Ferg kind of made a good seal on the left side, but just in general, even your better run blocking tight end and Brevin Spanford didn't really have a good run blocking game. I don't know. I think if you're going into next year and it seems like Shoddy really wants to be a power run offense, they seem like they want to set up play action pass with their run game, which I love that idea. I think it's very effective, but I think they also need to consider maybe swapping some tight ends out. And you've seen Schoonmaker. You kind of know what he is.
Mhm.
He's not an NFL level player. Not anything more than the third tight end on the roster. I think I'd love to see Brevin Spanford get some tight end two reps, but even if they don't go that route, I would be happy if they just made some minor upgrades at tight end. We'll see how that goes. But other than that, Shoddy, kind of some bad play calling at times. I saw him, that sack that Dak took where he almost got a safety. Dak's got to be more aware there. I'm not giving him a pass. I think the ball was at the 10-yard line or maybe the 9-yard line, and he ended up all the way back in the end zone. And he was aware enough, and it was the right call, by the way, for anybody that's debating whether or not that was a safety. Under the broadcast said that it was a bad call, but then a couple plays later, I think it was Gene Steratore or whoever the ref or the rules analyst is, kind of came back in and showed the angle they used to overturn that call, and it was the right call. Dak was definitely over the line, but number one, Dak's got to be aware there. You can't be running backwards in the pocket on when you're at your own goal line like that. That's just not smart football. But number two, I got to blame Schottenheimer for that. It's third and I think it was third and two or third and three, and you're at your own goal line. Why, and we looked at this, but three of the four routes that they ran on that play went 10 plus yards down the field. It's third and three at your own goal line. Just throw it short or run the ball even. I would be happy with that. I don't care, but you don't run long developing routes down the field on third and short.
Yeah,
I think
not with only
that
one.
was an error.
Yeah, it was definitely, especially like you said, with only one crossing route to really get the ball off if you need to, which obviously Dak didn't hit on that crossing route. He just went ahead and took the sack. But yeah, I 100% agree. That's just a bonehead call.
Yeah, and the
Just
good
you don't
outweighs
do
the
that.
bad. It really does. Schottenheimer has, 6 or 7 drives a game where he orchestrates a masterful drive, great play
Right.
calling, and you're gonna see that in almost every Cowboys game with him, but then there's just a couple of things where I just kinda wonder to myself, like, is this just lack of experience, or is it just nervousness in the moment against a big team? But then, we saw the last game against the Chiefs where they got the ball with, 2 or 3 minutes left and they were aggressive. They were pushing the ball, they were getting first downs, but like that's the time where you run a Pickens slant to me.
Mm.
That's the time where you trust your soon to be 30 plus $1 million year wide receiver to just go make a play and get you a first down and keep the drive alive. So that's the only thing I really want to talk about with the offense. I want to kind of get into the defense because there's plenty to cover there. We'll try to not bore you to death. But first things I just want to mention, I thought Ezaraku played a really good game. Again, he's been getting better every week. Obviously he didn't have a big impact on the game, but he was there in the run game. Again, not showing some of those pass rush skills that we saw out of college, but he is a great run defender. I think I would even say the way he's played this year, he might be a top 10 defensive end run player. So I think he did really well. Another player I wanted to point out was Sam Williams. I thought Sam Williams had another great game. I didn't see any boneheaded dumb things. He wasn't trying to commit unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, and he wasn't jumping off sides. I know
No,
there
I
was
didn't
that.
see any splash plays from him. He didn't make any big special teams or anything like that this week or anything,
Oh no, he
but
did.
he
He had
was
the blocked
making.
field goal.
Oh, there. Yes, that was him, wasn't it?
Yep, he had the blocked field goal. That was him.
Okay. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
And I mean, other than that, he didn't make any huge plays on defense, but he was
Right.
consistently in the right place and he didn't lose contain on the run plays. He wasn't letting the cutback lanes get outside of him, is basically what I'm trying to say. So I was
Yeah.
actually kind of impressed with Sam Williams, and I
Yeah,
think it's a
he's
contract year too, so maybe that's maybe that's some of it.
yeah, that's probably why he's strung a few good weeks together so far here lately.
Hey, he's trying to get a payday, man. I can't blame him.
No, you can't blame him for
I
that.
will say I think what we missed the most on this defense was Jadeveon Clowney. I think we really needed him in that game. Jadeveon Clowney's probably our best pure pass rusher on the roster right now, which is kind of sad to say. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think Quinnen Williams is the best pass rusher on this team. But as far as pure pass rusher defensive end goes, I think Clowney might be our best pass rusher right now.
Right.
And so missing him really hurt, and just that veteran experience of keeping contain on the outside, not getting up the field, letting the quarterback slide up the pocket. Like, he's just a little bit more, he's just more seasoned. He kind of knows how to play the position better. And I think we missed him a lot. The biggest thing in this game was just how bad our linebackers played. And I mean, I don't want to berate the guy, but I don't know if you saw the comments Schottenheimer made today in some of the pressers, but he was kind of defending Kenneth Murray. And I just don't understand that one at all.
Yeah, no, I really can't understand that either. I think we've covered enough at this point of Kenneth Murray to know that he's not the answer.
No, he's not.
When you need to spell Wilson, or you need to give one of the other guys a couple breaks or a couple plays worth of a break, you bring him in. He's a rotational guy maybe, but as a starting middle linebacker, I think the jury's out on him, and we don't want him here in Dallas. Let's just
Not
say
at
that.
all. Not at all. Yeah, Schottenheimer, basically the comments he made, I was trying to find the exact article where he said it, but basically, what he said was that Kenneth Murray is playing better than we think. A lot of the plays where he seems to be out of position. Basically, what Schottenheimer's trying to say is we don't know the scheme they're running. Maybe he was supposed to be in some of the places he was in. And it was other guys that failed. I got to be honest with you, man. I think that's gaslighting. I think I think a lot of that comes from just trying to protect your players and
Mm,
kind of coach speak, as they say. You don't want to berate the guy in the media either, but if you're trying to tell me that Kenneth Murray is your best option at linebacker, then you failed miserably. And that's really all there is to it. Somebody failed miserably in team development if that's your main guy. Honestly, I don't really think he should be on the roster at all, because at the end of the day, if he's going to be bad, I would rather see Maurice Leafau, or I can't remember how to say his first name, or Shamar James get those reps, because if they're all going to be bad, I'd rather the guys that I don't know anything about show me what they're about than a guy who's been in the NFL for, I think, 8 years now, and he's never been a good linebacker in the NFL. Like, since he got in the league, he's not been good. So I kind of feel like if that's your best option, then you shouldn't have made the Logan Wilson trade at all. And that was the other thing Schottenheimer said about Logan Wilson, is that he was really more of a depth move, which I thought was crazy. I don't know why you would trade for a guy he's pretty highly paid if you're not going to play him. It kind of blows my mind on that.
yeah, I feel like they want that to be a depth move because acknowledging him as the starter, or should be starting, acknowledges the fact that the Kenneth Murray signing was awful, and we're
Yeah.
paying him all that money in it right now for nothing, when we could have just traded at the middle of the season and gotten Wilson and been in the
Hmm.
same spot, if not better.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I will say, you know, it seems like with Schottenheimer, at least so far, he's been a little bit more willing to move off of guys that didn't work out. I mean, you
Hmm.
saw him trade Mozzie Smith away. You saw him kind of, they cut Kyer Elam. So a lot of the guys that in really Diggs too, it looks like they're going to be basically benching Diggs and not playing
Yeah.
him at all this year. Just the way it sounded. He didn't say that exactly, but I think the word Schottenheimer used was he's got to show us that he's ready to do everything the right way. And a guy who's been in the NFL for what, 5 or 6 years now, you already know how
Hmm.
to do it the right way. If you don't,
Yeah.
then you don't belong on the roster. And that's just the way it is. And so, kind of the same thing there, though. They're benching Diggs, like they've cut Kyer Elam. It seems like they're more willing than in the past to accept like they've made some mistakes.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of surprising me that they haven't moved on from Kenneth Murray, or at least taken those reps away and kind of split them better with Logan Wilson. But it's a mystery to me, and I think to most fans would feel the same.
Yeah, it's definitely a mystery to me. I feel like even if it's not, just Logan Wilson, there are other linebackers that those reps could be going to.
Oh, for
So.
sure. And I will also say this: I think as far as the future goes, Demarvion Overshone is by far the best potential that we have at linebacker.
Hmm.
But I will say, since he's come back, he just hasn't looked that good, and I don't blame that on him. I mean, knowing the injuries that he had, it's amazing he's even playing football right now. He really probably
Hmm.
shouldn't be playing football, and I don't say that because I don't wanna see him on the field. It's because I feel like you're compromising this guy's future if he gets hurt again because of compensation, which is a whole nother topic we can talk about later. But when these players get these injuries, they're gonna start compensating, And until they're fully mentally ready, it's not so much physical with these kinds of injuries because, I mean, I don't know if you ever had an ACL tear or know anybody that has, but usually around 4 to 5 months in, you're running again. You're already making cuts and jumping and all that stuff. So it's not so much a physical limitation with him, it's a mental limitation, and if you're compensating, it worries me that he's gonna put himself in a really awkward position and get hurt again, and I just think that,
Right.
you know, I know we had a lot of hope that he was gonna come back and fix this defense, which he's part of the reason that it's played better for sure, but it seems to me like maybe they shoulda just let him rest and let him fully heal up and get a full off season of training before they started him again.
Yeah, I mean, now after the couple games that he's been back, I would probably say, yeah, that would have been a better route to go. But before, whenever there was still plenty of hope for playoff contention and all these other things, I don't know. I felt like it was the right choice at the time. But like I said, looking back now, yeah, if I would have known what I know now, I probably would have just rested him. Practiced him every week, had him come to practice. Practice like you're going to play every week, and then just let him rest.
Yeah, I agree completely. The other person I want to talk about on defense, and we'll kind of move off of this after that, but I want to talk about Siobhan Revel, or however you say it, Revel. I thought he played bad, and he did play bad. I think he had a lot of blown coverages, and he fell on that big play where thankfully Goff threw it out of bounds. But
Mm,
he had a few bad plays, and the reason I think that he played bad is because the scheme makes him play a position or a style of the position that he's just not naturally good at.
yeah.
And I think maybe in 5 years, Siobhan Revel will probably be a great zone corner, but you knew what he was coming out of college. You knew he was a man press corner who could lock up some of the best receivers in college football, and you knew he had this big knee injury, and yet you're still trying to play him in a position that it just doesn't seem like is natural for him. And, you saw the play, I think it was to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the back of the end zone. I might be wrong on that, but it was kind of like a fade route with a pick, and he ended up just backpedaling pretty much the whole
Mm,
play. And man coverage cornerbacks don't like to backpedal. They like to stay face to face, hip to hip with the receiver and follow them wherever they go. And I just don't think number one, his knee. It looked like he hurt his knee in that game too. But number two, I don't think that he has the agility yet. I don't think he's recovered to that point where he can backpedal fast enough for the NFL level. So a lot of what I saw from Ravel is not so much that he's bad, it's that you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
mhm.
And, which we'll talk plenty about Eberflus as we go forward, but man, it does not seem like he's gonna be the guy here.
Yeah, it's just a glaring he's one of the glaring points where it's like, okay, scheme versus skill set is not a match here.
He's not putting his players in the best positions to succeed.
Right.
And, we can even go back to Dan Quinn on that. I mean, Dan Quinn inherited a team that really the defense was terrible when he took over, and he didn't have any of the guys that he was comfortable with. And they let him have a few years to develop the roster the way he wanted. So you got to give him at least that. But what I saw out of Dan Quinn and even Mike Zimmer towards the end of that last year, he started figuring out what the players were good at and what they weren't good at, and he would stop putting them in positions and in spots where they're just not comfortable.
Mhm.
And if we don't see some of that out of Eberflus over these next 4 weeks, I mean, I'll tell you what I would do. I'd fire him anyways because I think you have a historically bad defense that has made a slight turnaround, but they've still been bad. I mean, they let up 28 points to the Chiefs. They let up 20, was it 21 or 24 points to the Eagles, who have a terrible
21.
offense. I mean, and then they, of course, just let up 44. I will say the defense was put in a disadvantage a lot by the offense. They gave them a lot of short fields, which is obviously going to be bad on any defense. But what I'm trying to get at here is Eberflus has got to show us that he can adapt, that he can adjust in the middle of a game when he sees what's working and what's not working. He needs to be able to go into halftime and say, "Hey guys, we got to fix this. This is what we got to do. We got to change how we're playing this team." And he's done that a couple times, but not consistently enough for me to come. For me, if I were Jerry Jones, I wouldn't be comfortable bringing him back. But I will say, and just kind of looking around the fan base and what people seem to think, I think Eberflus is going to be back, man. I think
I think he will too.
they're gonna point to consistency and continuity, and, they're gonna say, "Hey, we fired." Well, they didn't fire a Dan Quinn, but, we lost Dan Quinn, and the very next year, we lost our next defensive coordinator. We can't do that 3 years in a row, and I respect that, but I think you also have to make sure that you have the guy that you want to be in the draft room for you next year too. Because when Eberflus gets in the draft room, he may not have a ton of influence, but the coaches are going to have some say so. And
Right.
I don't know if you want Eberflus being the guy to change your personnel and to draft the future of this team and then be gone next year when the defense is bad again. That's what worries me the most. And then we'll have, four defensive coordinators in 5 years, and we're back to the same problem with Dak Prescott's window starting to kind of close. So I really hope that they're aggressive this offseason and get rid of him. And tell you what, you could pretty much hire anybody from the Houston Texans coaching staff, defensive coaching staff, and I would be happy. I don't even know their names. Just find one of them, defensive line coach. I don't care. Just find one of them, hire them as your new defensive coordinator, and give the guy a shot. That's kind of how I feel at this point in the season with this defense.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's a coordinator issue really at this point. I think it's a mixture of everything, you know. Obviously, he could do better, but at the same time, we may see better from him once all these guys have gotten acclimated to the scheme. They've been playing together for, they've had an off season together. So I could kind of see the argument both ways on keeping him and getting rid of him. I personally would agree with you and probably would just get rid of him and get somebody that I wanted for the long haul, that I
For
knew for
sure.
sure that I wanted. But, I can see the argument for wanting to keep him, along with the fact that we don't want to just keep switching coordinators. So,
Yeah, I see that. I just think that if you're really trying to make a Super Bowl push, you need to be certain that you have the right guy for the job. Dak may play into his 40s, but how high of a level will he be playing in 3 years from now? I think Dak is kind of at the prime of his career. This is the best I've seen him play. I think maybe 2 years ago he probably had a slightly better year statistically, but the confidence, the ability to drive the ball and put it in the right place. This is the best I think I've ever seen Dak Prescott play. And if you get maybe 2 or 3 more years of this level of quarterback play, you have a Super Bowl chance. You have an opportunity. This is your time to push all the chips in and go for it. So I just don't think if it were me that I would want Eberflus back for that. I just don't think he's
mm,
gonna be able to produce a championship level defense. But with that being said, I kinda wanted to jump into talking about kind of the future of the defense. We're gonna talk about the NFC playoff picture here in a little bit, but I did wanna kinda jump into the future of the defense and kinda talk about who we think is coming back for 2026. Maybe a little early to talk about it, but I'm kind of curious of what your thoughts are. There's some free agents out there that, who knows, they may get re-signed to their teams. But I think one position that I would look at is trying to get a better safety.
mhm,
I will say safety is a premium position, and what I mean to say is that it's a luxury position. It's not where you start building your defense. But if you have the basis of a good defense and then you go add a Brian Branch into the situation, or name some of the other cornerbacks out there, whoever, if you go add some of these elite safeties into the mix, you go from being a average or slightly above average defense to being a game wrecking defense. And I think the Cowboys have a chance to be a slightly above average defense next year if they draft well. But I was kind of looking at some of the names that are coming up in free agency next year, and I don't know if the Colts will re-sign him or not. But Nick Cross was one that I kind of earmarked as I think he would be a great fit here. I think he's
mhm,
he's a really good safety, athletic. He knows how to hit well, and I doubt the Packers are going to let this guy go. But Quay Walker would be awesome to add to this linebacker room. If you
mhm,
don't want to draft linebacker early, I think you got to address linebacker in the draft for sure. But if you want to make an immediate change to the quality of linebacker play, I think if you can get Quay Walker, that would be pretty awesome. Devin Lloyd is also looking like he's going to be available from the Jaguars, and he would be a good linebacker to add to this group. But I think he's more of a will linebacker, so kind of what DeMarvion Overshown's doing, but it would be kind of
mhm.
cool to add some depth there too. And I was also kind of thinking, if we're not going to sign Javonte Williams, we could also look at Travis Etienne if he becomes available. I think that would be a pretty good move as well. And the last one that I had on my list of kind of available free agents was Kyle Pitts. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think it'd be pretty awesome to have Kyle Pitts on this team, man. Could you imagine CD Lamb, George Pickens on the outside? And then now Kyle Pitts hasn't been a great tight end in the NFL, don't get me wrong, but I also don't think he's in a scheme that allows him to be anything above average. I don't think that they have
Right.
a quarterback that can make him anything above average. So I think if you put Kyle Pitts on this Cowboys offense, man, that would be something special. We could have a record-breaking offense with that. Of course, assuming they figure out how to block for their quarterback again.
Yeah, that's he's definitely an intriguing name still, even after all the years that he's really done me dirty in fantasy football and hasn't produced at all. But he's still an intriguing name, but at the same time, 1 or 2 more years of that guy not really doing much, and he might be hard pressed to find another team,
Mhm.
so I don't know how excited I am on a guy that's, on the verge of being on his way out of the
For
NFL if he
sure.
doesn't ever produce.
Yeah. Again, I
This
think
year
that
he's done better, but
right.
at the same time, if I'm thinking about adding him to the team at the end of this year, he's going to need to do more than what he's done so far.
Right, and I think it's important to use context there too because, again, I think he's very much so limited by the offense they run and the
Right.
quarterback play they've had. Dak loves tight ends. You remember
Mhm.
when Jason Witten spent his last couple years here in Dallas, I mean, Dak was feeding him. Now, he wasn't
Mhm.
explosive anymore, really, he was never that explosive, but
Mhm.
he was still a solid, consistent pass catcher for Dallas for a couple years when Dak was here, and I think Dak loved that kinda safety blanket, when the pressure's coming, I know I can get the ball out to Jason Witten, right? Like, I know I can get
Mhm.
5 yards out of this play at the minimum because he's gonna catch anything that he touches,
Yep.
and the Cowboys are missing that, man. I think they're missing a tight end who can just save plays, and, the Cowboys seem to be infatuated with throwing the ball to Ferguson in the flats and expecting him to break 5 tackles and get up the field, and he's just not that guy.
No,
So
he's not. He's not the athletic guy that's gonna even break the 1 or 2 shackles in open field, and get the first down, which is ideally probably what they're trying to do on most of those plays.
yeah, and even
They
when he
expect
does, he
Fergie to
fumbles.
catch the ball. Yeah, they expect him to try to break 1 tackle and get a first down.
Right,
Turn a 1 or 2 yard play into a 8, 9, 10 yard play. Just I don't think that's going to happen very consistently with Ferguson. Trying to play that role. He's not a big bodied tight end, but he's kind of a bigger tight end. He's somewhat athletic, but he's really not a whole lot different than what we've had since Witten and Schultz and all those other guys. Jarwin, like they've all been kind of the same. Semi
right,
athletic, decent hands. That's about it. That's all you're going to get from him.
right.
So asking him to do things like break tackles and open field and stuff like that is just another way that I'm, like, scratching my head with some of the play calls with this.
Yeah, I think they believe in Ferguson more than anybody else does, and they love
Yeah.
throwing him the ball. I will say this, though, they have started connecting on some of those seam balls. Over the middle of
Mhm.
the field. And I'll tell you another thing, Dak Prescott, and I'll stand on this. You can bring any film you want to against it. Dak Prescott is the best seam ball thrower in the NFL. He can put the ball layered over linebackers' heads in the perfect place so consistently. We just don't have a tight end who's capable of going up and taking those balls in. And Ferguson had a couple good ones. He actually had a pretty big gain in this game. I think it was like a 25-yard catch he caught over the seam, but he's not consistently gonna do that for you, and even in that first, I think it was the Eagles game at the beginning of the year, Dak threw a perfect ball to this guy right in the end zone, and yes, he took a hit, but it's like, you're a big-bodied guy, you gotta go get the ball. You gotta hang on to it,
Mhm.
and so I think Ferguson's just not that guy. He's not really athletic, but he's also not very good at catching tough footballs. So it's kind of it's either or. I just think you need to find an upgrade at tight end. Anyway, so as far as that's concerned, I feel like the Cowboys need to set themselves up for a good draft with a good free agency. They need to make sure that they're not looking for depth in the 5th and 6th round. They need to be filling those depth roles with solid veterans in free agency. I'm not asking you to go out and spend $40 million a year on a guy. I'm asking you to go spend $5 million a year on some solid veterans who can actually come in and play above, their pay grade. And they've done that in the past. I think this free
Stephen
agency was
Gilmore.
just kind of rough. Yeah,
Stephon Gilmore,
yeah,
that was one
Stephon
of them.
Gilmore had a great season with the Cowboys. He had a lot of, mess ups, but he's also an older guy, and he's probably not the guy you want to rely on, but that was a good move, and they got
Yeah.
solid play out of him. So if they can go make a few moves like that, I think this defense is going to be set up for success with the draft. That being said, I also wanted to kind of go around the NFC, talk about the playoff picture here.
Mm.
First thing I want to talk about, which is my favorite topic in the world, is when the Eagles are collapsing. It's
Mhm.
very reminiscent of, I think it was 2023 when they started, I think 11-3, and then they lost like 3 of their last few games to end up, I think the Cowboys won the division that year. So
Mhm.
but similar in terms of the team looked sluggish. They looked like they weren't inspired to play for their coach anymore. And of course, he turned it around the next year and they won a Super Bowl. So it didn't matter that much, but it does matter for this year. And the Eagles are collapsing, and it is awesome to watch as a Cowboys fan. So have
It
you
really
noticed?
is.
Yeah, have you noticed anything about the Eagles that kind of stand out as to why they are playing so bad?
I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and it is great to watch it happen, but at the same time, I feel sorry for some of the players on the Eagles that, I'm a kind of a fan of that they're having to go through what, the Eagles are going through right now. They've got a heck of a defense. And as far
Yes, they
as
do.
what causing the collapse, I'm going to have to go ahead and say that it's almost 100% on their offense.
Mhm.
Offense and the fact that the coach may be losing some of the locker room.
Yeah,
Um,
I
their
would agree
their
with that.
offense is inconsistent at best. They have 2 great receivers, but they have a quarterback that there's always been questions about how well he throws the football ever since he was
Mhm,
in college. That was his thing in college. If y'all remember, Jalen Hurts and Tua Saban would take one of them out and put the other one in at halftime because one of them was throwing the ball bad or something. So it's not like he was just this stellar college, passing quarterback, and everybody seems to have forgotten that just because he was in a Super Bowl MVP last year, that this isn't a big surprise, like him having troubles throwing the football. Throwing
mhm,
4 interceptions in a game is kind of a surprise, but the multiple turnovers isn't. So I would have to say if I was to pinpoint it, I would say it's on the offense, but you don't want to downplay the fact that maybe the coaches are losing some of the locker room,
mhm,
especially after the stuff that happened between AJ Brown and the rest of the team and social media and the quarterback getting involved, getting asked about it in interviews and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they're just not on the same level of like the same vibe that they were at the beginning of the season and coming off
mhm.
that Super Bowl win.
Yeah, I could agree with that for sure. I think a couple of the things that I've noticed, I haven't watched their film like I would the Cowboys, but I have kind of looked at a few things. Number one, their offensive line is really banged up. And uh,
Yes.
Lane Johnson, and this is a crazy stat, and I'm sure you've probably heard it when they've been on Sunday Night Football. But so this is the stat. So with Lane Johnson playing, the Eagles are 110, 51, and 7. Without him, they are 15 and 27. That's a huge difference. Now, of course, there's context. I'm sure there's plenty of games where maybe Hurts wasn't even playing in those games without Johnson. So, of course, you
Right.
give grace on some of that. But when it's that big of a disparity, it tells you that this guy is somebody they really rely on. They need him to anchor the right side of that offensive line. And when he's not in the game, they just don't play very good. They don't run good. They don't protect Hurts very good. The first thing I would point to before I point the finger at Jalen Hurts would be his offensive line's just not very good this year, which is hilarious because they by far had the best offensive line in football last year. And it's pretty crazy to see how fast things can change in this league. But yeah, I think Lane Johnson being out has been a big part of why they're struggling, which of course they've been struggling all year, and Lane Johnson's only been out a few games. But I think he definitely contributes to that. The other thing is Jalen Hurts is not seeing the field very well. And I'm sure there'll be some Eagles fans who disagree and hate on it, but the reality of it is you got a quarterback who has open people a lot of times, and he just doesn't even look their way.
Right.
He is so fixated on 1 or 2 players on every play, which is somewhat normal. Of course, you go through progressions as you're playing quarterback, but he kind of I think he predetermines where the ball needs to go on a play, and when it's not open, it's like he panics a little bit and he starts running when he doesn't need to yet, even before the offensive line is broken down. So, Jalen Hurts will have wide open guys running across the field in front of him, but he is fixed to the left or to the right, and he won't even notice the guy who's just completely wide open over the middle of the field because he's fixated. He wants to get the ball to AJ Brown. And that which is the funniest part of all this to me is that AJ Brown was complaining, kind of, running his mouth to the media a little bit about not getting enough targets. And he's had 3 straight games over 100 yards. At
And we
the
haven't
same
heard nothing
time,
from him.
exactly. But at the same time, they've lost 3 straight games.
Right.
So, I don't know if AJ Brown is part of the problem or the solution. And, it might be, like you kinda said earlier, it might be starting to be a locker room cancer kinda thing at this point. I know
I
they keep a
wouldn't
tight ship
put that
over there.
on him though.
No, I wouldn't either.
It may be a locker room cancer, yes, but this was all cultivated by the fact that they paid him all this money. And so, how it breaks down to me, I'm looking at it from, say, I'm a receiver. Say I'm in AJ Brown's shoes. They pay you all of this money one season. The next season, you come in and you're not getting the ball as much. So, you're going to be frustrated because you know what's coming this offseason. If they didn't do well, you know what's coming this offseason? Hey, AJ, we're going to need you to take a pay cut. Yeah. And as the receiver, you know that's got to be coming. In the back of your mind, you're like, you might even start to think, are they not getting me the ball because they know they're going to ask me to take a pay cut?
Hmm,
They know they can get me for cheaper if they put it in, if I have a bad season and then come the end of the season, have to take
right.
a pay cut or they can get rid of me to somewhere, that type of thing.
Mhm.
So I can understand his frustration. Now, do I think that was the Eagles' plan? No. Obviously, I don't think that was their plan from the beginning. But I can understand his frustration because as a receiver, you know that talk is coming this offseason
Mhm.
if he doesn't get his numbers up.
Right, and he's 28 this year. So going into next season, he's going to be a 29-year-old receiver. And, once you start getting past that 30-year-old threshold, it gets a lot harder to get a big payday as a receiver, rightfully so, because usually production falls off with it.
Right.
But I kind of see what you're saying there. I think they're going to have a tough decision to make this offseason because this is probably, I mean, other than the offensive line not playing well, this is pretty much the same offense as last year
Yeah.
just with a different coordinator, Kevin Patullo, and we'll want to rag on the poor guy. I know he's getting eggs thrown at his house and stuff, but he's just not been calling very good plays. But at the same time, when he is calling good plays and guys are getting open, that's when Jalen Hurts is timing it wrong. And I think that it's kind of a mixture of the two. Number one, I just don't think Jalen Hurts is a very good NFL quarterback. Not that he's bad. I think I should clarify that. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. I just don't think he's a very good quarterback. And I think that he's the kind of guy who needs a defense like they have right now, and he needs to be able to run around a lot to extend plays and make stuff happen. And the Eagles offense is just not conducive to that right now. They're just not finding ways to get to, I think they need to work on some short passes, stop trying to make these developing down the field plays. They need to get Jalen Hurts in a rhythm at some point. And you kind of we were mentioning the 5 turnovers. He had 5 turnovers in this game technically, which
Hmm.
was hilarious because that first one in the second quarter where he threw the pick, and there's a couple picks on Jalen Hurts in this game that was really not on him, but that first one was awful.
Hmm.
It was so bad. I watched the play a few times, and I'm just trying to think, is there any reason he went over the middle where that defensive tackle dropped in the zone? And I just don't think he saw the defensive tackle. It happens, it's not the end of the world. People are gonna quarterbacks are gonna throw picks. But then, they fumble the ball, the Lions recover, and now next thing you know, the Lions have or not the Lions, sorry, the Chargers have the ball pretty much already in field goal range. And, so Eagles defense actually holding them, I think it was to 22 points, right?
Hmm.
Actually pretty impressive, and I'll just tell you this, the Chargers tried to give them that game. They were doing everything in their power to charger in that game. They were doing
Yeah.
everything they could. The Eagles just outplayed them when it mattered, I'm sorry, they didn't outplay them when it mattered most, which is what they have done most of the year.
Right.
So that's kind of the thing I saw in that game, but, also just want so kinda talking about the Eagles transition to a little bit of our route to the playoffs. What it comes down to is the Cowboys need the Eagles to go 2-2 over the next 4 games. And we kinda mentioned this a little bit at the end of the podcast last week, but the Eagles are gonna be playing the Raiders, which honestly, the Raiders have a chance to do the funniest thing ever. It would be
Yeah.
the funniest thing I could ever imagine to watch the Raiders somehow beat the Eagles. That would make my entire year. I don't care if the Cowboys even make the playoffs. It would make me laugh to the point where I could not stop making fun of the Eagles if they find a way to lose the Raiders.
Yeah.
But they need, probably the Bills to win, which I think is very likely. The Bills are kinda getting desperate now. They've lost too many games, so I think the Bills are gonna come in focused. But they also need the Commanders to probably win one of their 2 games against the Eagles, which is not unrealistic, especially as bad as the Eagles have played. But we'll see if Jaden Daniels is gonna play anymore this year. Another side topic here we can come back to later. I think the Commanders might be playing better with Marcus Mariota than they have been so far with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at times, but you don't wanna that's a dangerous road to go down because you know
Right.
Marcus Mariota is not Jaden Daniels,
For
and
sure.
you don't wanna if Jaden Daniels comes back and has got 3 or 4 weeks to play, I
Mhm.
say play him. He's not playing this week, we've already gotten the update on that. He's not playing this week, so but I feel like if he can come back next week and he's 100% and there's no risk of re-injury outside of, injuries happen, I feel like you go ahead and you play him.
But I think you play him for sure because and the reason that that's so important to play him, not so much because they're out of the playoffs this year. I think they're what 3 and
Right,
8 or something like that, 3 and 9. So they're out of the playoffs. That's not my concern at all. You need to play your young quarterback to see what you got there because next
right,
year after that season he's going to be eligible for an extension and they're going to have some tough decisions to make if they have another bad year like this. So
right,
I think it definitely makes more sense to put Jaden Daniels in the game if he's healthy. I will also say I don't think he should be playing football right now. Just a disclaimer on that because he dislocated his elbow. And I'm just telling you, I don't care what these doctors are saying. He is going to re injure that elbow. He already did slightly, but he's going to, every time he falls, Commanders fans have got to be cringing and hoping for the best. Because if he
mhm,
lands on that outstretched elbow, with a compromised elbow structure, like if his ligaments are not holding on very well, he's going to re-injure that elbow and it's going to be a lot worse. I just personally, I don't think he should be playing anymore this year. But if they're going to play him, if they think he's healthy enough to play, absolutely he should be playing instead of Marcus Mariota. But I have to say, and that's why I brought all this up, is because I think Marcus Mariota actually fits their system very well. And he's not gonna come back from 14 points down and win you a game very often, but he is a good enough game manager. He doesn't take a lot of dumb risks and he's agile. And I think that fits their system pretty well. So it would be pretty
right,
awesome though to see Marcus Mariota and the Commanders go whip up on the Eagles. But we need it. We definitely need it if we want to make the playoffs. And actually, that was kind of something I also wanted to throw at you and see what you thought. Now, this is only from fan perspective because if you're the coach of a football team, you cannot ask your players to play bad on purpose. I get that. But do we want the Cowboys to make the playoffs? Do we actually think that they have, even if they get in somehow? We've seen how they played against teams like the Lions now. They played good against, the Chiefs and the Eagles, but now those games don't even look that good. Looking back on them, you're kind of thinking like, man, the Chiefs aren't that good. And the Eagles obviously aren't that good. So, you know, of course you only play the guys that are on your schedule and they were who they were at the time and the Chiefs were the Chiefs at the time. But at the same time, you kind of look back at those games and you're like, man, were those really that good of wins after all? And so going into next season, like, do we want the Cowboys to make the playoffs, or would we rather them miss it slightly, show some potential and hope, and then get a better draft pick where we might be able to get a more premium player in the draft?
I personally, I voiced my opinion on this the other day when we were kind of talking about it. I would be okay with it. I'm okay with if we made the playoffs, I would actually, because you're going to give a lot of guys some very valuable experience.
For sure.
You're going to have playoff experience, even if it's just 1 or 2 games. A lot of guys don't get that. So I think it's just a great as far as experience.
Sure.
So for me, yeah, like I would say, yeah, I'd still want them to make it if it's possible. Yeah, we get a little bit worse of a pick, as far as draft goes. But I think the experience is going to counteract that, if not be even more valuable than that pick. So,
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'm more of like a team builder mindset kind of guy. Like,
hmm,
if I could choose any job in the world, it'd be to be a GM, which I may would have regretted that if I ever got that job. But because you're held to such a high standard and it takes a long time to change a roster structure. But if it were me as a GM, I'd be like, man, I don't think we're good enough to hang with the Rams anyways. I don't think we're good enough to hang with the Lions a second time. I don't think we'd beat them if we played them a second time either. So there's like a few of those kind of teams you could look at too. I just think that, you know, if we're being realistic and honest, I think I would prefer us to miss the playoffs and get a better pick. But as far as team morale goes, and as far as keeping the locker room together, I think making the playoffs would do wonders for this team. So I'm not
right.
really upset with either outcome, but if I had to choose, I just don't think you're going to beat some of the better teams in the NFC anyways. And I'd rather get, 5 or 6 slots better in the draft. I think you could probably go get some pretty impactful players with a, 15, 16, 17 pick versus a 22 and a 27. But, that kind of remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. The Cowboys have their own work to do. They gotta beat the Vikings who, although their offense has been pretty bad this year, their defense has been consistently pretty good. I think, last time I looked, they were like the 6th ranked defense in the NFL this year. So the Vikings are gonna throw stuff at you, and Brian Flores is all that he is advertised to be. He is awesome at disguising blitzes, changing things up. You just never know what you're getting with him. So, although I expect the Cowboys to play good against the Vikings, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a low scoring, kind of sloppy game where the Cowboys offense looks dysfunctional a little bit. But I think they're the kind of offense that it doesn't matter how they play quarter 1 through 3. If the game is close and you got, 8 minutes left on the clock, I think the Cowboys have a good enough offense that it doesn't matter who they play. They're going to find a way to put points on the board. So I think we'll probably see a sloppy game from the Vikings, but I also think you'll see the Cowboys probably win that game just out of sheer talent difference.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I don't know. I see that that could be a game that we end up winning by. We have another one of those kind of Raiders like games where we just everything clicks.
Mhm.
Um,
I hope so.
it seems like that's the ongoing thing with the Cowboys. Every year it's just a matter of them getting our hopes up, have a game or two like that at a certain point where it really matters, and then reality you get brought back down to reality with a game
Yeah,
like the Lions. So
right.
I could see the Vikings doing that same thing. We come in and we beat the Vikings pretty bad. Next thing you know, we're like, oh dang, the Eagles lose two more games. We could give somebody a run for their money.
Right.
And then we lose to the Commanders or somebody like that later in the season. It's
That's
like,
that's a
okay,
very Cowboys thing to
what
do.
was I thinking? Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I was also kind of I think I might have mentioned this last week in the podcast, but somebody had pointed out that every NFC North team we've played this year has destroyed our defense, and the link there is that Eberflus was the head coach of the Bears last year. And I'm not saying this is true, but it's also kind of interesting to think about. What if the NFC North just knows how to beat Eberflus's defense? It's very possible. I mean, because
The
you've seen for years the Cowboys have struggled against teams, like the and that Kyle Shanahan lineage. They've seen consistently that people who learn from Kyle Shanahan can beat their defense. I almost kind of wonder if that's changing a little bit and you're seeing some of the NFC North style of offense kind of just be better. They're just kind of whipping up on Eberflus.
I didn't really think much of that up until you just said that, but that could actually be a really good possibility. If all those other NFC North teams have seen him a bit and they know what his defense is about, maybe it's just that much easier to scheme for the Cowboys and plan for
Mhm.
the Cowboys.
Yeah.
That's a good point actually.
Yeah, and I didn't really get too far into the Vikings, kind of, researching how they play, but, it's sloppy. I mean, they looked great last week. I think they won 31-0. Again, that defense it's gonna be hard to score on, but I think we'll do that. But I'm more worried about, kind of is our defense gonna be able to stop their offense? And it should be able to in theory because JJ McCarthy has not been very good this year, but he played great last week. And if he's starting to figure some things out in the NFL, we could be in for a long week. But I think the Cowboys have the clear advantage here in this game. I haven't looked at the betting lines, but I believe they're favored pretty heavily in that game. And
Mhm.
but the Vikings are not going to lay over. They're going to fight you and they're going to punch you in the mouth. They're a physical style of defense. So the Cowboys have to be, I think, I don't want to go super deep into this, but George Pickens is going to have a clear headed game. I think
Mhm.
they're going to need him more than CeeDee Lamb in this game because I think CeeDee gets bullied a little bit at the top of his routes, and Pickens is just big enough and strong enough where if his head's on right, there's nobody that can stop him. It's more mental with George Pickens, and I'm not going to talk about some of the the loafing and stuff people were talking about this week with George Pickens, how he looked like he didn't have a lot of effort. I don't really buy into a lot of that. I think he played about like he normally does.
Mhm.
That one deep route that Dak threw to him, everyone was kind of criticizing. That was just a bad ball. I hate to say it. I love Dak Prescott. I'm probably his biggest fan in the world, but it was just a bad ball. And he threw a couple of bad deep balls in that game. He threw one to Flournoy out of bounds. He threw one to CeeDee Lamb that went out. Like he's not connecting on the deep balls a whole lot. And I think that pass was just too far inside. And Pickens was he was double teamed, and the cornerback had the inside, so he couldn't really push him out of the way. And he was running full speed down the field until right at the very end. That's when you saw on the live footage that the ball looked like it landed right next to him. But if you look at it on all 22, the ball was about 5 yards inside of him, like on the inside of the field, and he just couldn't get there. And so I don't really buy into the whole like George Pickens was loafing. He didn't look good. I mean, I don't think he was himself, but I don't think that was this Pittsburgh Steelers George Pickens everyone's trying to make it out to be.
Right.
But I definitely think in this game you're going to need him. He's going to have to beat some guys at the top of his routes. He's going to have to get some of those slants. He's going to have to catch the ball. That's a huge part. Like actually catch the ball on those slants when it hits you between the numbers. And of course, Dak Prescott had those 2 picks, and that one was on George Pickens completely. But anyways, I think the Cowboys will have some success in that game, but we will see. And they're going to need it. They have to win out if they want a chance to make the playoffs. I don't think the Eagles are going to go. I don't think they're going to do worse than 2-2. So you were definitely going to need to win out.
I agree 100% on that. I mean, really, it comes down to, we need the Eagles to lose. So, as far as I'm concerned at this point, I'm just going to try to enjoy watching the Cowboys play. And if come the end of the season we find ourselves in a position to where, hey, if we win this game, we're going to the playoffs, then great. And if we don't, then I'm just going to try to enjoy the rest of the season as much as possible.
Yeah, well, that's the best way to approach it with the Cowboys because if you let them take off too much or take on too much of your emotion, they will make you scream and yells. And you know me,
Yeah.
I love to do that when the Cowboys do stupid things.
Give
I'd
them the
like my blood
goods.
pressure to stay regulated in this Vikings game, so we'll see if the Cowboys are gonna try to set me up for a heart attack or not. But well, that's all we have for you guys today. We'll be back next Thursday to discuss the outcomes and hopefully abstain from draft talk for another week. We'll see if the
Yeah.
Cowboys will allow that for one more week. But follow us on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, and Spotify, and try to stay up to date with us. We're going to be posting every Thursday, and kind of follow along on our TikTok. We're posting some videos there too, some short clips of the podcast, and some other things too. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for listening. And we will see you guys next Thursday.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you next time.